Hello, all, and welcome. We are back with another episode in our series, Coaching for Transformation, the podcast series that helps leaders grow through powerful coaching insights. I'm Dario Minaya, and once again, I'm joined by Susan Minaya, Executive Coach, COO, and Chief Learning Strategist at Minaya Learning Global Solutions, who has helped hundreds of leaders reclaim their time and their calm. Today, we're diving into a universal leadership challenge, Overwhelm and Time Mastery. Stay tuned to learn more. Susan, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks, Dario. So good to be back with you.
Of course. So let's jump in. Overwhelm is something nearly every leader has faced, but it often comes with guilt or pressure to just power through. So why do you think it hits leaders especially hard?
Overwhelm is a red flag that something is misaligned, Dario, whether it's our energy, our priorities, or support systems. It's not really about weakness. When you have that feeling of overwhelm, it's feedback. For leaders, overwhelm often signals they've slipped into a reactive mode. They're doing firefighting, doing others' work, or chasing goals without clarity on what matters most for them. So the first step isn't fixing the calendar, it's naming what's happening. A coach helps slow the swirl for them, and I think make space for strategic choices with time.
That makes sense. All right, well, let's redefine this idea of time mastery. I noticed you didn't say time management.
Right.
So what does it actually look like?
I prefer time mastery because it is less about managing time and more about owning your focus, right? So true mastery comes from aligning your calendar with your purpose, strategic value, and well-being. Time mastery is possible, but we have to take a critical eye to how we're handling our time presently to see how to master it going forward. I often have clients start with a time study, tracking how they spend their time in 15-minute increments. Then we ask, what's strategic? What can be delegated? What doesn't need to be done at all or done perfectly? And while they typically, Dario, balk at this activity because it's so tedious,
I can imagine.
I know. For you, you'd be like, no. The clarity it brings becomes a game changer for them. We then co-create their ideal week, not just for work, but for life, right? So the calendar isn't just about your professional life. It's also the personal side comes in as well, because your calendar should reflect your values, not just your obligations.
Okay, so walk us through your approach when coaching a leader who's feeling overwhelmed.
Absolutely. I often use a coaching process called the 4-part reset. It's designed to help leaders move from reactive chaos to intentional clarity. So here's how it works. The first step is awareness. We start with that time study, that horrible 15-minute increment time study. And of course, we can be flexible with that depending on how willing or unwilling they are, but the more granular they are, the better. For 1 week, the leader logs their day in these time increments. This creates awareness of how time is actually spent, not just how it feels like it's being spent. So if they are a new leader or even new to a specific leadership role, I'll have them build out their leadership dashboard as well, which is a tool I use that allows them to be clear on their purpose as a leader, their motivation as a leader. Why am I here? What's my vision as a leader? My goals, my values? What's my brand? So they have clarity about that before we move into the next stage. We use this leadership dashboard really as their North Star for the rest of the work.
Okay.
So the second part is alignment. Together, we look at the data and connect it to strategic priorities. Now we know kind of what they're all about, what they care about, what they want to do. So we bang what they're doing against that. And we also explore their values and personal needs, because time mastery isn't just about work, as I said, it's about aligning life holistically for well-being. So the third step in this process is action. So here we're going to be designing their ideal week. This includes blocking focus time for high value work that they would be doing, building buffer time between meetings, right? So they can actually go to the bathroom or like just take a breath before they start the next round of, meeting discussions, carving out space for self-care and delegating wherever possible. And then finally, the fourth step is accountability. Finally, we coach through the barriers, often faulty thinking or limited beliefs like I always have to be available, or I'm the only one who can do this, or I have to be perfect. It sounds like trite, but believe it or not, these are really things that leaders think sometimes. They get in the way for them. I help them build micro habits to overcome these beliefs and faulty thinking that they can leverage to reframe it when they're in the moment. We talked a lot about this in our first segment in this series on perceptual coaching, if you recall.
Yes, I do recall. I was going to say that sounds very familiar.
Yeah.
Okay, what are some traps that keep leaders stuck in overwhelm?
Great question. There are 4 that come up again and again that I've seen. The first being perfectionism.
Mm-hmm.
Leaders might polish emails too long, they over prepare their decks for presentations, or they redo others' work because they think it's not good enough. And so they're going to make it A plus, right? Better work. And that A plus mindset eats up time, and it also trust, because when they're like redoing other people's work, it really erodes the relationship with the people that they interact with.
That's understandable.
The second one is poor delegation. Avoiding delegation for control or speed sacrifices their true priorities, right? So if they want to hang on to all this non-return on investment time that they're doing, they're leaders, they're supposed to be working on the big things. And if they don't do that and they're hanging on to things like managing their own calendar or doing their own airline flights. I mean, I know a lot of people do this, but especially in like nonprofits, I've seen this a lot too, that they have a tendency to be not great at delegating because they don't have a lot of resources. So they're kind of used to being scrappy and doing it themselves, but when they really sit down and think about it, they can actually have someone else do it and delegate. So no boundaries. That's the second one. Saying yes to everything leads to calendar chaos. So I don't know if you know those individuals that are always like, oh, absolutely, I'll be there. Of course I want to be in that meeting. Either it's fear of missing out or feeling I have to be present, or I just want to be seen as a real team player. And then it causes that overwhelm feeling. So coaching creates say no scripts and scheduling rules that we'll have that will not make it possible, right? And then the fourth would be lack of clarity. So here's when leaders chase too many metrics. They dilute their impact, right? We help them define success and focus only on what matters most. So we just get very finite. And here's where we go back to the leadership dashboard to kind of use that as the North Star that we bang against as we're doing this work, right? So these are things that challenge both new and seasoned leaders.
Would you be able to share a story that brings this type of transformation to life?
Of course. For an example, I worked with a healthcare executive who was essentially exhausted, 70-hour work weeks, right? Pulled in every direction. Through our coaching engagement, she decided to reorganize her team for better support after looking at her time study and really focusing on her leadership dashboard on what's most important to her and what does she want to accomplish as a leader. She became intentional with her meetings, scheduling them only for 45 minutes to allow time for bio breaks and resetting, as we talked about between meetings, blocking deep work time on her calendar to do the important work that required thought and reflection. Basically, the work of leaders. Leaders often just do not create that space for themselves to close the office door and focus on the big picture things that they could be working on. And then also delegating communication to her executive assistant and leveraging her executive assistant as a buffer, right? So you can get to her without going through the EA, which is really a great tactic. She didn't need to be bothered with all that scheduling. They set boundaries between the two of them, when she's available, when she's not, so they knew how to handle that. She also blocked time for, believe it or not, self-care. Wow, what a novel thought. It's like lunch, for example, right? How many times do you see leaders that sit and they're just eating at their desk? They never leave. They're eating while they're working and they don't take a break. Morning prep time, coming into the office, giving yourself 20 minutes or so to just kind of breathe and kind of prep for the day. And informal interaction time with teams and colleagues, so block off an hour to go walk the floor or go talk to your team or, go visit Bob down in finance and just see what's going on with him, surprise him. It wasn't just calendar hygiene. It was a mindset shift for her. And she saw time as an ally all of a sudden, something she could really master to do the work that she needed to do that aligned with what her idea of her leadership role was. And, it really reconnected her with a sustainable rhythm for her leadership.
So, Susan, from your standpoint, what's one question every leader should ask themselves this week?
Probably the most important is my time being spent on low impact activities? And I think you could say, where's my time being spent? It's too big of a question.
That's broad.
Yeah. Let's go on. Where is my time being spent on low impact activities? And what would it mean to reclaim even one more hour in my day? If I throw that over the wall and delegate it to someone else or have my EA handle it and I get that hour back, what could I do that's really powerful for me? And then what belief or habit do I need to shift to make that decision? Because maybe I'm thinking I have to do it because I'm the only one. So this goes back to reminding yourself, am I falling into old habits or false beliefs about myself? So even a 5% shift, right, in this creates momentum for them.
My goodness. Powerful as always.
Thank you, Dario.
Of course. Well, thank you, Susan. And to our listeners, if you're caught in the whirlwind, coaching can help you find your calm and chart your path forward. Stay tuned for our next episode where we explore coaching for culture changes. Until next time.